The A race. This is not the way you want to start out. I was messing with my GoPro, trying to make sure it was turned on. A little panicked moment. The wheels are going away. You start to get clipped in. And thank goodness the guys didn't tear off like banshees like they normally on the first lap. And I'm able to roll up. Now, I'm just going to tell you, if you're watching this video, it's for a discussion about racing. I can't really say that what I'm going to do in this race is interesting at all, nor does it have a lot of tactical meaning or lessons to extrapolate from, although there'll be a moment that's a little bit, I guess, tiny bit noteworthy. But I don't even make it to the end of the race here. It's not the complete A race. It's just partial. I actually didn't get dropped. I sat up after my seat started to move and collapse or, bend forward. And I thought that's as good excuse as any to let my tired legs go and drop off the back of the race. I had just raced the 40 plus right before this and put a hard effort in on the lead out. So I'm always a little tired going into a race that happens just a few minutes later. Plus, I just have to admit I'm not in the greatest shape in the world, so it is what it is. But anyway, I thought it might be interesting to talk about the Tulsa Tough. I'm narrating this video on June 13th, a week after I took the video, a week after I raced, and in between the race and today, over this past weekend, Tulsa Tough took place. I've never raced in Tulsa Tough, and this past weekend was no exception. I was not there. I've never been there. But I have watched many of the races over the years on their video stream. And I thought there was something particularly interesting this time on their video stream that wasn't present before, or at least I'd never watched it before, which was commentary from Daniel Holloway and his broadcasting partner in crime, Gabe, and I'm forgetting what Gabe's last name is. Gabe is kind of more like the play-by-play guy, and Daniel Holloway is the color commentary guy, if you will. Daniel Holloway is a name known to everyone who has been following crit racing for a long time, because at least at one time it was probably safe to say he was the best crit racer in America, with a lot of success, including, I think, three, USA Crit Championship, something like that, maybe more, definitely two or more, and tons of wins, more than you can shake your fist at. And as I understand it, he had a lot of wins where he didn't really have a lot of representation, where he was riding for himself, by himself. I think it was Steve Tilford, the late Steve Tilford, who had, he had this blog, and I used to read his blog, and at one point he talked about Daniel Holloway, and so it was kind of like one legend talking about a new legend, talking about how dominant Daniel Holloway was at the time that he was writing this blog post. If you get a chance, if you haven't heard of Steve Tilford, look up his blog. I think it's still up on the web. I haven't looked in a long time, but this is just a guy blogging about his journey as this guy who raced bikes his whole life, and he even came down here to Dallas at least once to race in the crits taking place here in our area. I don't think he ever raced the Tuesday night crit, but I know for sure he raced the Fair Park King Racing crit at least once, maybe more. And just seeing his name on Strava leaderboard on the trail that goes from Fair Park up through White Rock and so forth, It was just kind of cool to see his name there. But anyway, back to Daniel Holloway. I get constantly distracted. It's not like we don't have time though, right? There's a lot of time to fill up here. I thought the commentary was amazing. And not to say that commentary in the past was bad or there was anything wrong with it. I love what Frankie Andreu does. He brings so much energy into his broadcast. Obviously, he knows more about racing and cycling than I can ever imagine. However, this commentary by Daniel Holloway and Gabe got into a level of detail about strategy and crit racing that I thought was just different level. And this is not a level I appreciate in the sense of, oh yeah, I know that's right because that's the way I do it and I'm an expert. Not at all. I'm not an expert. I'm a beginner and I'd like to learn more. And I am learning more by just listening to you. To them. I will put a link to at least one of the broadcasts in the commentary, in the description of this video. And you can check it out. They did all 3 of the crits, pro women and pro men. So that's something like, what is that? 3 times 2, i.e. 6 times 1. That's over 6 hours, 7 hours of commentary. Of course, I don't suggest, I'm not suggesting that you have tons of time to listen to 6 or 7 hours of commentary, but I think if you're really a student of crit racing, it's worth watching at least 1 or 2 hours of their commentary, maybe the first night particularly. Not that those were necessarily the most dynamic races, but there was a lot of talk about strategy and something that's a pretty flat crit. Therefore, most pertinent to the kind of maybe crit racing that us people here in Texas mainly do, which is mainly flat. So if you watch that, the Friday night, is it Blue Dome racing, with their commentary, that'll give you a great idea of whether you agree with me that their commentary is on point. So let's talk for a moment, just for a moment, about what's going on in this race. As you can see, I'm way far back. I started in the back. I've not moved up. I've not made up any ground. And I'm not really in the race at all. I am zero impact of the race. I don't even really exist in this race. The only way that I'm going to exist in this race is if I do something of consequence at some point in the race. And if perchance I was able to save energy in the back, which I'm not, looking at this gap open up and my inefficient lines and everything else, if I was able to save energy from a certain strategy in the beginning that comes to play later, then yes, technically I'm in the race now, and I will be influencing it later, hopefully through energy conservation at certain points in this race. Now, that doesn't actually come to fruition here, but theoretically it could come to fruition. Now, the danger of being so far back here is that weak riders ahead of you, if there are any, that get gapped, give up. I may not ever reintegrate. I may get dropped. I may get split off. It's a big risk being in the back if you're actually someone who's in the race. I see that looks like we're gapped right here, so well, not so bad. Actually, guys peeling off to the right, kind of letting off the steam. Guys that are going a lot slower, they're always at risk for not being able to accelerate and get back on the train. You got to stay on the train here. Absolutely. Do or die, because you're not going to bring this back solo. Here we can see speeds of 32 miles per hour or so. We're strung out, single file. That means they're turning, they're hitting it hard, turning those pedals up at the very front. Getting back to the Holloway broadcast, I think it's interesting to think about the tactics of a particular team controlling a race. And of course, in that particular race, it's Legion of Los Angeles, where their trademark style is to control the crit from the front, control brakes by usually bringing them slowly back as they don't join the brakes, but just let people go off the front, tire themselves out, and just ride their pace, taking turns, reeling people back in. More rarely, perhaps, they would send somebody into the brake with the responsibility of not doing any work in the brake, but just holding on, and that their presence is just a disruption, being in the brake. Here's me trying to move up a little bit. But more often than not, they're not sending people up into a brake. If you watched the Crybaby Hill race on Sunday, you'll see a different strategy that Legion used to good effect. That was not controlling the race. The Williams brothers are not really those kind of punchy over and over climbers that do especially well compared to some of the other racers on the Crybaby Hill course, so they typically are going to have a different strategy than normal in that particular race. There was a lot of discussion from Daniel about how you challenge and disrupt the Legion tactic, especially at the end of the race. At the end of the race, he talks about getting your own train formed and bringing your train up to about second wheel of the Legion train. Therefore, you are crowding their designated sprinter, and you are putting pressure on the Legion train to go faster than they want to go. Therefore, the train hopefully will burn up and burn out before they want to. So, for example, if they're hoping that their train lasts until, the very last lead out, but they burned out a half lap before then, that's a significant problem for their strategy. And by having the sprinter push, crack the whip on the domestiques ahead to go a little bit faster to disrupt the parallel train that's getting in the way, that's the way to pressure the dominant lead-out train. Now, easier said than done. He also talks a lot about teammates preserving energy for each other by gathering together and giving each other relief and space, less pressure to hold your spot, people can let you in and so forth. And one of the questions I have in my mind is, to what degree are these tactics actually playing out at the amateur level? Of course, I'm at a level that's so far below professional American crit racing. I mean, it's, like Major League Soccer and a dad's recreational league. It's a different ball game. It's the same game, but it's different. It's completely different. Here we are in what we call, the A race, which is, I guess, technically professional 1, 2, 3, although not really having a lot of professionals. But we do have, Cat 1s and so forth, all the way down to Masters Cat 3 like myself. Really trying to hold on here, stay on, hoping guys don't get gapped in front of us. At these levels of racing, your tactics are going to be different. They're not going to be as predictable. People are going to do dumb things that don't really suit themselves or their team. You can't really predict what people are going to do in the same fashion. Now, if you do the race over and over, you get to know who you're racing against. You know their tendencies. You know their strengths and weaknesses. Then, things change. I remember in one race, this was like 4 years ago, a long time ago, better shape back then. And it was the A race, and it was the final lap. So that, I'm trying to be in the mix in the final lap. And I get behind this guy. I know his name. I know who he is. He hasn't raced, at that time, he hadn't raced much for a while. Like, he'd been a big racer before then, but he's kind of coming back. And I thought, big guy, I'm in the perfect position. He's going to lead me out. Boy, did he die in the last 200 meters. He just died. Like I was surprised. And, of course, it ruined what I was trying to do. Did not get the lead out. So, I learned my lesson. I was like, don't be on his wheel again in that kind of situation. I thought I was getting pulled to some, kind of good result, but it didn't happen that way. You learn about your competitors over time. Even at the Cat 1-2 level at the Tulsa Tough, which is, regional/national, your dynamics are going to be much more unpredictable than the professionals. The professionals know each other. I was talking with Ryan about this, my teammate. The professionals know each other. They know their strengths and weaknesses. It's more predictable. Have you ever watched professional poker on TV? You've probably seen instances where there's professionals playing against amateurs. And the amateur does something really kind of dumb and unpredictable, like a not wise bet based on the cards. But through bluffing or some other means, the person actually beats the professional. And the professional, when they find out what happened and how it happened, is very upset because they realize, they lost to somebody who didn't really technically play well. Not how a professional would play, but due to luck, the worst player won. And perhaps the analogy holds true to bike racing too, where people do things that aren't really smart or predictable, and it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen. You may have to improvise a lot more. Another thing that even though we're really trying to work together as a team, but you have to take this with a grain of salt. We've only been racing for 4 weeks. So it's not like we have months or years of experience working together. But guys getting together to sort of protect each other, ride together, ride in a group or pack, we haven't really done that. And I don't see that people in, say, for example, some of these races do that all that often. It's not as organized as that. I guess they could argue in a race like this, at the A race here, regional, weeknight crit, such dynamics are not necessarily needed. And it's a lot more, go with the flow. Work together if you can. Don't worry if you can't work together. And it's not such a strict agenda. There may be a lot of scenarios at play. Who's got the legs? You're welcome to attack in the breakaway, whatever. It doesn't, there's not someone who's going to be mad at you if you tried something, as long as you didn't completely screw over a teammate. In the Daniel Holloway podcast, now they actually have a podcast as well as the commentary they did for the video broadcast. The podcast is called, I think it's called The Call Up. And I think it's on Spotify. I think if you search for The Call Up, you'll get a different The Call Up. So I think the best way to find it, if I remember, I'll put it in the description. The podcast, I'll put it in the description. The link to it. But my screen that I'm looking at for the race just froze, so I got momentarily distracted as I was trying to get this thing back online here. I will put those links up, and you can check those out. But anyway, he was in the podcast. They were kind of calling out a team based on their tactics. I guess it was in the Saturday race where there was a major breakaway, about 20 riders, and 3 of the riders were butcher box. And Daniel Holloway was wondering why, from the main group, there was a butcher box rider on the front who was pulling back the brake, who was neutralizing the brake. And why would butcher box want to neutralize that brake? Mr. Holloway could conceive of no reason why a butcher box rider should be getting into the wind to do that. So even at the most professional levels of racing, not everyone will be on the same page, not everyone has the same agenda. Some people are showing out, even in the NBA. People are wanting to get contracts. People want to score points. People want to pad their stats. People want playing time. It's not all about winning. It's partially about showing your stuff. At this level of racing, like for what I do as a masters racer, I have no aspirations to, there is no opportunity to be a professional, nor do I have the capability, time, or talent to do that. So it becomes a lot more about ego, because it's definitely not about money. It becomes about the pride of accomplishment, the respect that you might engender among your friends and acquaintances in the cycling community. It's fun to have some kind of result. It's also the culmination of a lot of hard work where you get to see the work you put in over time benefit you. But there's reasons to say, I want to win and I'm going to prioritize my results over everything else. I'm going to prioritize my results over my team's results because technically, I like being on the team, but gosh, I'd really like to grab that golden apple and show out if I can. It takes a different mindset to say I have zero opportunity or is not part of the plan at all to show out or try to place, but rather to have a strategy where I'm going to be trying to benefit other people on the team. The domestique role. I guess this is Calvin right in front of me here with no gloves, shaking his hand for a moment. He placed third in the Masters 40. Was it third? I think it was third place in the Masters 40 just before this. And who's this on the left in the cadence, far to the left? On the Cervelo, black Cervelo, I think that's John. I've noticed in a previous race he kind of hung out at the back and then just tooling around. But he had a major attack later in the race, so he's someone that I think this strategy is appealing to, do a lot of conservation of energy and then just try to explode, go off the front, and employ that as a tactic for his team. There are a lot of nuances talked about in that commentary from Daniel Holloway about placement in the group. Where is the most efficient place? The energy required to get the best place. There's discussion about the best lines, the best sprinting lines, and keeping momentum, giving yourself a little space. They talked about the Saturn attack. What's the word? Saturn. I think it's the Saturn attack. It's definitely the word Saturn from the former professional team Saturn. If I'm not mistaken, Adam here on the right, my teammate, number 077 on the right, on the red Trek, 2 riders ahead of me on the right. I believe he was on Saturn. He might or might not watch this, but if he does watch this, he will correct me if I'm wrong. I should add that Adam has 5 national championships on the track. That point has been clarified from my last video. But anyway, let me talk about the Saturn attack. The Saturn attack is where you just so you have your own group on the front, and someone in your group at the back or near the back, or at least a couple wheels back, lets the riders in front roll off. So for example, if we were going to do a Saturn attack here into turn 3 to the finish line, and there were like 3 riders on my team ahead of me, we go through the turn, they explode after this dip, and I sit up, or soft pedal, or don't kick. A gap may open up very quickly of 2-3 bike lengths, maybe more. And okay, this is a critical point. You saw how a gap opened up there, and I let a little gap open. I tuck in behind a rider who's letting the gap open further, and now it's trouble. Now it's trouble. And having to spend a lot of energy to get back on to just cover this gap that was completely unnecessary. I started off right behind this guy, but somehow ended up having to put in a big effort to get right back on this wheel. Now I'm going to be a little more tired. If I recall correctly, further gaps are going to be apparent soon. And what I didn't realize or think about in the moment was that there are riders behind me that are much stronger and much more favored, that are behind me and having to react to what I'm doing here. So you can see this, the race is starting to go away here. Here's Grayson on the right, recent Masters national champion. You can see his stripes on his arms in New Mexico. Crit national champion. He's behind me. That's, he shouldn't have been behind me, because that's trouble. He's going up to close that gap, and Adam, my teammate's like, go! It's like, use all your energy, get back on. So, I screwed it up. I need to make it right for him. And me putting in some energy here to try to get up on terms here. Here's Adam, here my teammate, closing the last part of this gap, and me sitting on here. So desperate times for a moment, but luckily things slowed down ahead of us that allowed me to get back on. So be careful. Being on my wheel, you might get dropped. I'll bet there were people behind that did get dropped through all that mess. But it just, it was a small moment of letting a little gap open, then getting onto a wheel that was getting dropped, and not recognizing the danger or not paying attention to the situation immediately. You got to be on the rivet, as they say. This is the first time that I had stayed in the A race for this long this year, except for the time I crashed, which was like a couple months ago. And in this case, I wasn't dropped due to fatigue per se, but through just deciding I didn't want to ride anymore and ride hard after my seat started moving around. I could have gone more, but I also didn't have a huge incentive to want to go more, and I felt tired. I could have suffered more if I'd wanted to, and I felt like there was something at stake other than just suffering more and being in the race and finishing it. From my experience in this A race, there have been many times that I have finished the race, and it was always much more likely that I would finish on the lead lap if it was a low wind day, and if the attacks at the beginning were not too hard. That gave me time to recover from the efforts of the prior race. And there was also the chance, if it wasn't such a strong field and it all came together and stayed together for a final group sprint, that I would have the opportunity perhaps to be top 10. These fields are a little bit stronger, so the opportunity is less, plus my fitness is less, but my highest place in the A race ever was 4th, and that was a half a wheel from being 3rd, which of course I won't forget. It hurts a little bit getting that close to a podium, but not realizing, who knows, that could have been the last best try. But as me, for my style and my abilities, a race that stays together and is relatively easy for the people in the bunch is ideal for me, to have a shot at my own individual placement. My own abilities right now don't allow me to really contribute to my teammates and their efforts for breakaways and such in this race. But it's good fitness and good practice, and you're racing with more experienced, better riders, faster, fitter riders, and the tactics are a little bit different, and it's more likely that people will employ tactics against you that you have to think about and respond to, like your positioning, wind, getting guttered, gaps, and so forth. It's fun to do, and that's the advantage of catting up, is that you can get these opportunities, and especially at a place like this where you can race more than one race, and it's not expensive. It's a great way to get more experience and to aspire to higher things, to race with the big boys, so to speak. Back in the old days of the Tuesday Night Crit, there was no 40 plus Masters race, so it was either B or A, and there was a big difference. Of course, there's a big difference between B and A, just like there's a big difference between C and B. C being 4-5, B being 3-4, and A being 1-2-3 as far as the categories. Big difference. And the tactics play out differently. Moving up a little here. Let's see, we are 31 minutes, so I think I'm about 5 minutes away from giving up. The reason that I'm doing this commentary instead of just throwing it in the trash, throwing the whole video in the trash, is the crit racing tonight was canceled because of rain. Even though this track holds up very well in rain, and people that are comfortable racing in rain, this is probably the ideal kind of concrete and setting to do that, because of these vertical grooves in the concrete. It really, that you don't get this like standing pooling water. It's almost like the concrete's the other side of a tire, and water goes into those grooves and you have enough traction. People can take those turns fairly fast and normal, although me, I don't particularly have that confidence. I've watched a lot of videos by NorCal. I think anyone who's on the internet that pays attention to racing tactics has watched tons of NorCal videos. I've talked a lot about Sprinter de la Casa, his YouTube channel that came way before NorCal, and discussion about race tactics, sprinter tactics, especially sprinter techniques. Watched a lot of those videos back in the day. But I feel like the Daniel Holloway thing was a different level. Really quite a different level of discussion about crit racing. And it makes you realize you can watch all the Tour de France in the world. And I have watched all, just years and years of that, countless hours. But that's a whole different beast. It's not crit racing. You're not going to learn the nuances of crit racing by watching guys fly up, mountain passes. That kind of racing is different. It's just like tight elbow to elbow, lap after lap kind of racing that's crit racing is a different kind of racing. And guess what? The best people in the world that have done that a lot and were the best at it and used the best tactics, I think you can learn from listening to them. Especially when they're completely willing to talk about it all. Kind of like football games, you can listen to John Madden. This may date me because some of you younger people that might be listening to this don't know who John Madden is, or just know him from the video game. Sort of every man's onomatopoeia, talking about, just sort of the everyman's blue-collar approach to talking about football, but not really the intricacies of the strategy. You don't really get that kind of announcing. I don't think it's popular. People don't really get into the weeds. And one guy pulling off. It's a race of attrition. Generally speaking, at this point in the season, they will not pull you if you're lapped and you know your business and stay out of the way. I guess how much longer am I going to last? I guess maybe this is probably the last lap for me, this next lap. But even if you're dropped, for example, you can just sort of slow roll or go as hard as you want and catch on with the group. As they come by again, as long as you don't interfere, just latch onto the back. I think maybe my seat had moved and messed up by this time. Can't remember if we get back on or not. I don't think that we do. Yeah, I think this is where I was like, forget it. Or maybe not. Should my memory be good enough that I can remember exactly what happened? See, I'm still pushing a little. I guess I'm feeling competitive. I need to get up to Bren. Bren can make it. I'm going to make it. Sit in this draft now. Let Bren do all the dirty work to take me out. Even if you're not really a play in the race, but you're on a team, if you can hold on, be in there, your teammates will notice. Whether your performance is good or bad, or you'll give them an idea of your fitness. Okay, so yeah, Bren got me back, and I think this is where my seat had started moving around already, and I was like, forget it. I'm done. I think I had the goal of getting to like 35 minutes at least. But just stand there a little longer, don't give up. Teammate here, Adam. 5-time national champion. And see you later, guys. I'm done. Off into the sunset they go. I will tighten up the bolt on my seat so I'm not pitched forward, and I'll catch you guys another time. Sleepy Crit commentary coming to you from the channel called Honest True. Learn from my mistakes, do everything opposite of what I do next time. See you later, bye bye.